It was supposed to be a quick trip, in and out, no drama. My best friend Jordan had been on my ass for weeks to get some non-depressing clothes before my job interview. I'd just gotten laid off from my retail gig and hadn't exactly been thriving since. He said if I showed up in another charcoal gray hoodie and wrinkled chinos, I might as well just stay home. He wasn't wrong. But still. So we went to this mid-sized clothing store in the mall, one of those chains that plays club music, like you're supposed to be hyped about turtlenecks. I was already grumpy, but Jordan made it worse by picking out stuff I'd never wear in a million years. Skin-tight jeans, this wine-colored turtleneck, and a bomber jacket that made me feel like I was cosplaying as someone with a social life. "You look hot," he said, completely serious. "You look delusional." He shoved the pile into my arms and pushed me toward the changing rooms. "Go, try, you're welcome." Jordan and I had been friends since high school. Same college, same mutual obsession with indie games, same habit of texting each other about dumb YouTube videos at 1 a.m. But lately, I don't know, something felt different. Or maybe I felt different. I caught myself watching him too long when he smiled, feeling a little too warm when he leaned over my shoulder to show me something on his phone, noticing the veins in his forearms, the curve of his collarbone when he wore tank tops. Stupid little things. Things I wasn't supposed to notice about my best friend, especially my straight best friend, or at least I thought he was straight. But then, why did he keep calling me cute every time I wore black jeans? Why did he touch my arm more than necessary? Why did he suggest a weekend trip to the coast with just the two of us in a tiny Airbnb with one bed? I didn't know, and I wasn't brave enough to ask. Anyway, I took the clothes into the changing stall and started trying them on. Tight jeans first. I could barely get them past my thighs. Outside the curtain, Jordan was already laughing. "Need help in there, or are you just making out with the mirror?" I rolled my eyes and unzipped the jeans. "You bought skinny jeans made for K-pop stars. I can't feel my legs." "You're welcome again." Just as I was about to call him in to give him a sarcastic fashion show, the first loud bang echoed through the store. Then came the yelling, and the unmistakable panic in people's voices. My heart dropped. I froze, still half-dressed, my shirt halfway over my head. I heard someone scream near the front entrance. Then another loud noise, something crashing to the ground. The music shut off, and the lights flickered. I yanked my shirt on and opened the curtain. Jordan was standing just outside the changing room hallway, eyes wide, frozen like he was trying to make sense of what he just heard. "What the hell was that?" I asked, stepping out barefoot onto the cold tile. Another crash. Then a man's voice, sharp and low. "Everyone on the ground! Don't move!" We both locked eyes. "Back in," Jordan whispered, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the stall. I barely had time to register what was happening before he closed the curtain behind us and locked it. We both pressed back against the wall, barely breathing. I could hear heavy footsteps stomping across the store, shelves rattling, people whimpering. Someone was robbing the store. I didn't even know this kind of thing happened in real life. It felt like a movie, but the fear in my chest was very real. So was the sound of someone shouting, "Empty the registers, now!" Jordan's shoulder was pressed against mine. He was whispering something, mostly under his breath, like a prayer or an attempt to keep himself calm. "Shit," he muttered. "Shit, shit, shit." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. What could I say? Time slowed. Everything outside the stall was muffled chaos. We couldn't see anything through the curtain, but the shadows under the door moved occasionally, fast, aggressive. I heard someone banging on the back storage door, probably trying to escape. My breath felt caught in my chest. And then, after what felt like forever, the noise began to fade. No more shouting, no more crashing, no more footsteps. I couldn't tell if they'd left or if they were still nearby. Either way, we didn't dare move. Jordan shifted beside me. The changing room was way too small for two people, and our legs were tangled up. His chest was rising and falling fast, like he'd just run a mile. I could smell his cologne, something fresh and slightly citrusy. It hit me all at once how close he was, his thigh brushing mine, his elbow pressed to my ribs. his hand gripping the edge of the bench so tightly his knuckles were white. "I think they're gone," he whispered eventually. I nodded. "Maybe." He looked over at me, and even in the dim light I could see something different in his eyes. Not panic, not fear, something else. "What the hell just happened?" he asked, still catching his breath. "We almost got killed, trying on turtlenecks." A breathy laugh escaped him. He reached up, ran his hand through his hair, then leaned his head back against the wall with a thud. Then he looked at me again. "I'm glad you were here," he said quietly. I swallowed. My heart was doing cartwheels. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. I nodded. "Yeah. Are you?" He didn't answer right away. Then he surprised me. "I think I would have freaked out if you weren't here," he said. "Like, completely lost it." My chest tightened. "Same." Another pause. This one longer. Then, out of nowhere, Jordan said, "You know, I keep thinking about what I'd regret if something had actually happened." That made my stomach clench. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me for a long moment. And then he said, "There's something I should probably tell you." I blinked. Jordan just sat there, looking at me like he'd made a decision he couldn't take back. The tension in the air was already thick from everything that had just happened outside, but now it felt different. Not just fear, not just adrenaline. Something personal, something real. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Tell me what?" He exhaled slowly. "Okay, so you know how I joke around with you a lot? Like the compliments, the teasing, all that stuff." I nodded. "Yeah? It's not all jokes." That made my breath catch. I didn't move, didn't even blink. He went on, voice quieter now, like he was still trying to work out what he was saying as he said it. "I mean, I used to think it was just a game. I liked messing with you. You always blush so easy," he said, his mouth twitching into a tiny smile. "But lately, it's not that simple." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My body had gone stiff, every nerve wired, tuned into every syllable. I was still bracing for him to laugh, to say, "Just kidding," to pull the rug out from under me. But he didn't. "I don't know when it started," he continued, "but I started noticing you, in ways I shouldn't have. Like when you laugh, or how your voice gets low when you're focused on something, or how you always chew your bottom lip when you're nervous." He laughed once, nervously. "God, I sound like a creep." "No, you don't," I said, my voice dry and tight. "You really don't." He looked at me, searching my face. "I didn't want to make things weird between us. But when that guy started yelling out there, when I thought we might actually not make it out, I kept thinking, shit, what if I never get the chance to tell you?" My throat was suddenly thick with emotion. I felt unsteady, like my legs couldn't decide if they were made of jelly or concrete. I wasn't ready for this. And yet, I had been waiting for it. For months, maybe longer. "You're serious?" I asked, trying not to let my voice crack. He nodded. "I wouldn't mess with you like that. Not about this." Silence stretched between us again, heavier now. The kind of silence that asks for a response even when you don't know how to give one. So I gave him the truth. "I've had feelings for you too," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "For a while now." Jordan's eyes widened, like he hadn't dared to expect that answer. Then he let out this quiet, relieved laugh and ran both hands down his face. "Are you kidding me?" I shook my head. "I thought you were straight." "I thought I was too," he admitted, "until you." That hit me harder than I expected. Hearing those words from him, the same guy who'd flirted shamelessly with girls for years, who once told me he'd never even kissed a guy, it made my stomach flip in the weirdest, warmest way. "I don't know what this means," he said softly, "but I know it's real. And I know I don't want to pretend it's not anymore." For a second, I didn't know what to say. I just looked at him. This boy I'd known forever. This boy I'd crushed on in secret. This boy who, in a twist no movie would dare write because it was too unrealistic, was sitting in a locked changing room during a robbery, confessing that he felt something too. You really picked a hell of a moment, I finally said, cracking a smile. Jordan laughed. Yeah, well, nothing like a robbery to bring people together. Another beat passed. Then he asked, "Can I sit closer?" I looked around the tiny changing room and raised an eyebrow. Where exactly? He smiled and shifted so our thighs were touching again, only this time it felt intentional. Warm. Inviting. He didn't look away. You know, if we weren't locked in a department store during a felony, this would almost be romantic, he said. I snorted. You're ridiculous. He grinned. And yet, you're still here. Then the sound of a door opening somewhere in the store made us both freeze. We listened. One voice, then another, then, "Police! If anyone's in the back, call out now!" Jordan squeezed my leg, and I realized my whole body had tensed up again. "They're here," he whispered. "We're okay." We stayed quiet until another officer called again. Closer this time. Then Jordan stood slowly, unlocked the changing room door, and peeked out. He looked back at me and nodded. All clear. We stepped out together, blinking under the overhead lights that had flickered back on. The store was trashed, racks overturned, glass displays shattered, but it was empty now except for a couple officers and a terrified-looking store manager. As we walked out of the changing area, Jordan brushed his hand against mine. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. They made us sit in the food court after the police cleared the store. A cop gave us water bottles and told us to wait until they finished getting statements from everyone. I watched two teenagers wrapped in emergency blankets sitting beside their mom, who was quietly sobbing into her phone. A security guard was sweeping broken glass from the floor. The whole place still buzzed with tension, even though the danger was gone. Jordan sat next to me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, silent for the first time in maybe ever. I didn't know what to say. I kept replaying what happened in the changing room like it was a scene from a movie. Not the robbery part, though yeah, that was terrifying, but the part where my best friend, my straight best friend, basically told me he had feelings for me. It didn't feel real. He glanced over and caught me staring. You okay? Yeah. You? He nodded slowly. Just processing. We sat in silence for a while, watching the mall fill up with red and blue lights reflecting off the polished tile floors. Eventually, the police took our statements. They asked if we saw anything. We didn't, just heard voices and crashes, then hid. It was weirdly anticlimactic once it was all over. Like, one moment you're fearing for your life, and the next you're back in the fluorescent lighting of a food court, sipping lukewarm water and wondering if you still need to buy those jeans. I didn't know if we were supposed to talk about what happened in the changing room. Part of me was terrified to bring it up again. Like mentioning it would shatter whatever spell had fallen over us in that tiny, locked space. But Jordan didn't act weird. If anything, he seemed calmer, like something that had been weighing on him for a long time had finally lifted. We took an Uber home because neither of us felt like getting back on the train. By the time we got to my apartment, it was dark out. Jordan followed me inside without saying anything, dropped his bag by the door, and flopped onto the couch like he lived there. Which, honestly, wasn't that unusual. I stood awkwardly near the kitchen, trying to act normal while my brain screamed, "Ask him what that meant! Talk about it! Do something!" But he beat me to it. "Hey," he said, sitting up straighter. "Earlier, in the changing room," I froze. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I wasn't trying to make it weird. I didn't want to keep pretending. I know I caught you off guard." "You didn't," I said too fast. Then realized that made no sense. "Okay, maybe a little, but not in a bad way." He let out a breath. "So, that wasn't a bad thing?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "Not at all." Another pause. Then Jordan smiled, almost shyly, and said, "Good, because, I wasn't kidding about any of it." I sat down beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "Neither was I. When I said I'd had feelings too, I meant it." He looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time, there was no teasing in his eyes, no sarcasm, just something soft. Real. "I feel like we've been circling this forever," he said. "I just didn't know if you felt it too, or if I was imagining it." "You weren't." He smiled again. "Okay. There was a long beat of quiet between us, but it didn't feel tense, just new. Like we were standing at the edge of something unfamiliar and had finally decided to stop pretending it wasn't there. Jordan nudged my knee with his. "So what happens now?" I laughed softly. "Honestly, I have no idea." He leaned back, stretching out with a sigh. "Cool, then we'll figure it out together." I nodded. "Yeah, we will." We sat like that for a while, not needing to say much else. Outside, sirens were still echoing in the distance. But inside my apartment, it felt quiet. Safe. Different. The world had tilted slightly, but for once, I didn't feel like I was losing balance. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finding something I didn't even know I needed. The next few days felt strange, but not in the way I expected. Jordan didn't ghost me. He didn't pretend like nothing had happened. If anything, he became even more present. He was texting more than usual, sending me dumb memes, asking what I was doing, dropping by with takeout, and no explanation. But we still hadn't talked more about what happened. Not in depth, and that was starting to mess with my head. Were we dating? Were we just talking? Was that one of those in the moment things that doesn't survive real daylight? I didn't know. And I didn't want to ruin whatever this weird new rhythm between us was becoming by demanding answers he wasn't ready to give. Then Thursday rolled around, and everything shifted again. He texted me mid-afternoon. "Jordan, want to help me pick out a shirt for the show tonight?" Me, "Since when do you care what you wear?" Jordan, "Since I might see you there." That last line made my chest tighten in a stupid, fluttery way. When he showed up at my apartment, he didn't even knock, just let himself in like always. Except this time, he brought a bag of shirts and dumped them on my bed like he was auditioning for a fashion ad. "Help me pick one," he said. "And don't say, 'none of them,' like last time." I tried not to stare at him as he held up options, but it wasn't easy. He looked good. Too good. Slightly sweaty from walking over, hair a little messy, eyes bright like he was hyped on caffeine or adrenaline or both. "Black," I said, pointing at one of the shirts. "That one fits you best." He smirked. "Just admit you like me in black." "Maybe I do." He paused for a second, the air thickening around us again like it always did lately. But instead of brushing it off with a joke, he surprised me. "Can I ask you something?" he said, a little more serious now. I nodded. "When we were in that changing room and I said all that stuff, were you scared?" The question caught me off guard, not because of what he asked, but how he asked it. His voice had dropped. There was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, the kind of thing he never let anyone see, not even me. "No," I said. "I wasn't scared. I was shocked, yeah, but I wasn't scared." He exhaled through his nose, nodding slowly. "I thought maybe you'd think I was just caught up in the moment, saying something because we were both freaked out." "I didn't think that," I said. "I mean, I wondered if you might later regret it or try to walk it back." He looked up, locking eyes with me. "I haven't." Silence settled over us again. Not awkward, just heavy, meaningful. He sat down on the edge of my bed, running a hand through his hair. "I've never said anything like that to a guy before, not seriously." "Same," I said, sitting beside him. "But I think we both crossed that line already." He turned to me. "What line?" "The one where we pretend this is just friendship." His breath caught just slightly at that. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think you're right." We were close now, knees touching, shoulders almost brushing. The kind of closeness that doesn't feel accidental anymore. His voice dropped again. "Do you want to try this?" It was such a simple question, but it nearly knocked the wind out of me. "Yes," I said, "I do." That's when he leaned in, not all at once, but slowly, like he was giving me every second to pull away. I didn't. His lips brushed mine softly, just for a moment. A quiet, careful kiss that still managed to short-circuit my entire brain. When he pulled back, he smiled slightly. "Okay," he said. "That wasn't awful." I laughed, more breath than sound. You're such a dork. Yeah, but I'm your dork now. Friday night came quicker than I expected. Jordan and I didn't call it a date. Not out loud. He just said, "You still down to come to the show?" And I said, obviously, like it was no big deal. But it felt like a big deal. We were in that weird in-between space where things had shifted, but we hadn't put words to it yet. We'd kissed, he'd admitted he had feelings. We were texting constantly, but we weren't boyfriends. Not yet. We hadn't even talked about what this was. And I was trying not to obsess over it, trying and failing. He picked me up around 7, wearing the same black shirt I told him looked good on him earlier that week. He looked unfairly attractive, his hair still a little damp like he'd rushed his shower. I spent an embarrassing amount of time figuring out what to wear, finally landing on a denim jacket and the jeans from the store, the same ones I'd almost died in. "Look at you," Jordan said when I opened the door. "Survived the robbery and still serving looks." I rolled my eyes, but I could feel my ears going warm. "You clean up okay too." The show is in this tiny venue downtown, the kind with sticky floors and $6 beers. The band was one of those indie pop groups Jordan had been obsessed with since high school. Loud, emotional, all synth and reverb and lyrics that sounded like inside jokes between best friends. We stood near the back, close enough to see the stage, but far enough that we weren't crammed into the pit. Jordan stood next to me the whole time. Not too close, but not far either. And somewhere in the middle of the third song, when the room was pulsing and the crowd was swaying and my heart was already beating out of rhythm, he leaned over and said, "I like this." I looked at him, unsure if he meant the song, the night, or this, us. But he just smiled like he didn't need to explain it. Afterward, we walked through the city without saying much. The air was crisp and quiet, a soft contrast to the noise of the show. It felt like we were in our own bubble, detached from everything except the sound of our footsteps and the occasional honk from traffic. "Want to go back to mine?" he asked casually. I nodded. "Yeah." At his place, we kicked off our shoes and dropped onto his bed like we used to. But it felt different now. There was a pause where we both seemed to realize it. Jordan leaned back on his hands. "Okay, so this might sound dumb. That's your specialty," I joked, just to break the tension. He rolled his eyes. "I meant this. Whatever's happening between us, I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to screw up what we had before, you know." "You're not," I said. "We were already changing. We just weren't saying it out loud." He nodded, looking relieved. "I like how it feels. With you." I bit my lip, heart racing again. "I like it too." We sat in the quiet of his room for a few moments, the hum of city life outside the window filling the gaps in conversation. Then Jordan moved closer, slow like always, giving me space, letting me choose. I met him halfway. The kiss was longer this time. Warmer. His hand came to rest on my thigh. Not in a pushy way. Just there, grounding us. It was soft. And careful. And way more intense than I was ready for. When we finally pulled apart, he smiled. "So, still not scared?" "Not even a little," I said, breathless. He chuckled. "Good. Because I'm still figuring this out. I've never, you know." I nodded. "I know. And that's okay." He let out a long breath and leaned his forehead against mine. "Cool," he said. "Because I think I want to keep figuring it out. With you." We didn't have a close that night. I mean, we kissed again. Longer this time, with less hesitation. Jordan's hand slid up under the hem of my shirt and rested just above my hip like he was testing gravity. But nothing else happened. No frantic undressing. No crossing lines we weren't ready to cross. Instead, we fell asleep fully clothed, side by side, both facing the ceiling. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. I woke up before him the next morning. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting sharp lines across his face. He looked soft, relaxed, like he wasn't carrying anything for once. I watched his chest rise and fall and tried not to overthink everything that was happening between us. When he finally stirred, he blinked a few times, then turned toward me with a half smile. "Morning." Hey, I said. You snore. No, I don't. You do. He stretched, groaned dramatically, and then slumped back onto the pillow. Okay, I might have, but you sleep like a brick. Trauma will do that to you. He laughed, then looked over at me with something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not teasing, not flirtation, just affection. It settled in my chest like warmth. I was thinking, he said, we should do something today. Just us. I raised an eyebrow. A second? Not date? He smirked. A real one this time. Something chill. Like what? He thought for a second. Let's go back to the mall. I stared at him. Are you insane? I'm serious. Dude. We almost died there. Yeah, he said. And you looked hot in those jeans. Let's complete the circle. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. You're ridiculous. Maybe. But come on, it'll be poetic. So we went. Not to the exact same store. It was still closed, boarded up with police tape. But we wandered around the same mall, like it wasn't the site of our near-death experience. He bought a pretzel and shared it with me without asking. I bought him socks with little cartoon dogs on them because he said they were dumb, which obviously meant he wanted them. We sat in the food court again, this time without cops or chaos. Just two guys sitting across from each other and trying to figure out what the hell they were to each other. I keep thinking about how weird it is, Jordan said, chewing a piece of his pretzel. What? That it took a robbery for me to grow a pair and tell you how I feel, I smirked. You could have just texted me, you know. He laughed. Yeah, but then I wouldn't have gotten locked in a changing room with you. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. So, us. What are we doing? His smile faded a little, replaced by something more thoughtful. I don't know yet, he said honestly. But I know I like you. And I don't want to go back to pretending I don't. That was enough for me. Then don't. He nodded once, then reached across the table and took my hand. Just like that. In public. No flinching. No looking around to see who might be watching. It was the smallest gesture, but it felt massive. The next few weeks moved in this weird, slow motion kind of way. Like we were learning how to exist in this new version of our friendship, one step at a time. We still did all the usual things. Late-night game marathons, pizza runs, laughing at each other's terrible Spotify playlists. But now there was something else layered underneath it all. A kind of quiet intimacy that hadn't been there before. An ease. A closeness that didn't need to be explained anymore. Sometimes, Jordan would reach for my hand while we were walking, and it wouldn't feel like a performance. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on his couch, and he'd toss a blanket over me instead of pushing me awake. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, natural. I didn't think I was the kind of person who got to have something like that. Then one night, it all came back up again. What happened in that changing room? We were sitting in his apartment, watching some dumb action movie he loved, when I asked the question I'd been circling around for days. Did that day freak you out? Like, what it meant? For you. For us. He turned down the volume and looked at me, his expression softening. The robbery part, or the kissing you part? Both, I guess. He leaned back, arms crossed, like he was thinking carefully. I mean, yeah. It freaked me out, he said. Not because I kissed you, but because I realized how close I came to never doing it. That hit me harder than I expected. He kept talking. I kept thinking, if something happened to you that day and I'd never said anything, never told you how I felt, I'd regret that for the rest of my life. I didn't respond right away. I just nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. I think I was waiting for some big moment to tell you, he went on. Turns out the big moment involved a ski-masked guy robbing a department store. Not exactly the rom-com setup, I joked, trying to keep it light. He smiled, then reached for me, this casual, confident gesture that still made my heart skip. His hand landed on my leg, warm and steady. "I don't want to be scared of this anymore," he said, "or confused. I just want to be with you." I looked at him for a long moment. Not the Jordan I'd grown up with. Not the guy who used to throw popcorn at me during movies and call me nerd like it was a nickname. This was someone else now. Or maybe just a version of him that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to step forward. "I want that too," I said quietly. "I think I always have." He leaned in, pressing his forehead to mine. Then he kissed me again, this time deeper, slower. There was nothing hesitant about it now, nothing half-spoken. And when we pulled apart, he just whispered, "Okay, so this is real." "Yeah," I said, "it is." Weeks turned into months, and what started as a chaotic confession in the middle of a robbery quietly settled into something stable, something real. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were awkward moments. Jordan had to explain things to a few of his friends who, to put it lightly, were surprised. I had to learn how to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop, how to stop convincing myself this was just a phase for him, or a fluke born from adrenaline and fear. But he kept showing up. He brought me coffee during long study sessions. He left little post-its on my desk that said things like, "Stop overthinking and kiss me later." He introduced me to his sister as his boyfriend. No hesitation. He made space for us. I did too. And sometimes, late at night, when we were lying in bed or watching a movie on mute, just because we liked the quiet, I think back to that cramped little changing room. How surreal it had been, how terrifying, how weirdly perfect. We'd laugh about it sometimes. Jordan even made a running joke out of it. Imagine getting robbed just so you finally tell your best friend you're in love with him. But it wasn't really a joke. Because if that day hadn't happened, if that chaos hadn't cracked something open between us, I honestly don't know if either of us would have ever said a word. We would have kept going. Best friends, almost something, but not quite. Dancing around it. Now, months later, we were more than fine. We were good. The kind of good you don't second guess. One night, lying in bed with him half asleep beside me, I looked over and said, "You know, I think you were right." He blinked at me, groggy. "About what?" "The jeans. They were hot." Jordan cracked a sleepy smile, pulled me closer, and mumbled, "Told you." I kissed the side of his neck, let my hand rest over his heart, and felt it beat steadily under my palm. What we had wasn't perfect. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. And I wouldn't trade that day in the changing room for anything, not even the robbery,